My son built a tree house with his grandfather. We woke up one morning and it was gone, chained sawed to pieces. It was unsafe and blocked our view. The neighbour said I didn't say a word. I drove 2 towns over, picked something up and waited for nightfall. We moved to Maple Ridge, Ohio, right after the divorce. I needed to get away from the city. Too much noise, too many memories, and not enough space for my son to be a kid. I found us a small 2-bedroom house on a quiet street with a big backyard and an old sycamore tree that looked like it had been there 100 years. My dad moved in 6 months later. He was alone too. My mum passed years back and he never remarried. He was the kind of man who didn't say much but always had something going on in the garage. Tools hung on the walls like they were part of a shrine when he offered to build something with Caleb, my son. I didn't think much of it. I figured they'd hammer a few boards together and call it a fort, but it became their thing every Saturday and Sunday, all day long. The two of them would be out there, soaring, drilling, laughing. Caleb was 8, but you wouldn't have guessed it. The way he listened to my dad, he followed every instruction, measured every beam. Twice. My dad showed him how to level the base, anchor, the supports brace, the corners. They didn't buy a kit, they didn't cut corners, they built it from scratch. It took them 5 weekends. They built a little deck with a railing, a trapdoor with a ladder. They painted it blue and red. Caleb came up with the name of the Watchtower. He even made a sign for it. Inside, there were 2 folding chairs, a flashlight, a walkie-talkie, and my dad's old army binoculars. The night it was finished, Caleb begged to sleep in it. We let him. I checked on him twice. He was sound asleep with his flashlight still on. That night meant the world to him 3 days later. I woke up early and went out with my coffee. Same as always, that's when I saw it gone. Not dismantled, not taken down, carefully. Destroyed, tore apart pieces of painted wood everywhere. Splinters all over the grass. The deck was shattered. The ladder was gone and the tree. The sycamore had deep cuts along the base where someone had chainsawed straight through part of the trunk. It looked like a storm had hit it, but the sky had been clear all night. I was still trying to process it when I heard a voice behind me. It was unsafe and it blocked our view. I turned around. It was our neighbour, Mr. Burgess. He stood there in his driveway, like nothing was wrong. He had on khakis and a button-up shirt like he always did, not a hair out of place. His wife, Mary, stood behind him holding their tiny dog. I didn't say anything at first. I couldn't. My mind was frozen. All I could do was stare at him. You should have gotten a permit. He said that thing was a liability, not to mention the eyesore. Then he turned around and walked back inside. I stood there for a long time. My coffee went cold in my hand. That treehouse wasn't just some kid's toy. It was the one thing my son and his grandfather built together. It was hours of hard work. It was something that meant something, and Burgess had it destroyed. I didn't yell. I didn't call the cops. I knew how this kind of thing goes in a place like this. He had money, friends on the city council. Even if I filed a complaint, nothing would happen. They just say it was on his property line or some nonsense like that. So I went back inside, sat at the kitchen table, and then I stood up, grabbed my keys, and left. I drove 2 towns over to see someone I used to know, a guy I hadn't talked to in years. We weren't close, but we had a shared history. I helped him once. Now it was his turn. I came back with something in the trunk. It was heavy, covered in a tarp, the kind of thing that doesn't leave questions when used. Right? That night, I didn't sleep. I waited. I sat in the dark living room until after midnight. Lights off, not just the hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the house. Settling, Caleb was asleep in my bed. He hadn't said much all day. He just kept asking why someone would do that. I didn't have an answer. I told him the truth. I didn't know. I waited until I saw the lights go out at the Burgess house. Then I got up, went to the garage and opened the trunk. What I had wasn't illegal, not exactly, but it was enough to make a point. A long roll of industrial strength, plastic, wrap a few gallons of fish, emulsion, the kind landscapers use to fertilize soil. It stinks like death-rotting fish and garbage, the kind of smell that doesn't wash out. I also had a crowbar, some nails, and a few other things. I won't name a name. I didn't plan to hurt anyone, I'm not that guy. But I wasn't going to let him get away with what he did to my kid. I moved fast, quiet gloves on. I wrapped the underside of his porch in plastic, nailed it tight so nothing leaked. Then I dumped the emulsion in through a small cut. I made it the top pit pulled and soaked into the wood. The smell would start slow. Then, once the heat kicked in, it would spread into the porch, the siding, maybe the vents. I didn't care. I also left something else, a sign, just like the one Caleb made for the treehouse. Same paint, same handwriting, except this one said, "We see everything from here." I hammered it into the lawn right under his front window. Then I left the next morning. I sat on the porch drinking my coffee like I always did. Burgess came outside around 7:30. I saw the moment he noticed the sign, then he smelled it. He started yelling for Mary. She came out gagging. He called someone on his phone, pacing in circles, shouting. I didn't say a word. 2 days later, a cleaning company showed up. They wore masks by the third day. They were tearing up the boards of his porch. I heard him arguing with the contractor, something about the smell being in the insulation. I thought that would be the end of it. But it wasn't. The following week, I came home from work and saw the police at my door. There were 2 officers, one in uniform, one in plain clothes. They weren't aggressive, but they weren't friendly either. They asked if I had a moment to talk inside. I said, sure. Caleb was at school. My dad was out getting groceries. They walked in, looked around real slow. The plainclothes guy asked if I had any problems with my neighbour lately. I shrugged and said we weren't exactly close. Then he pulled out his phone and showed me a photo. It was the sign, the one I left in Burgess's yard. Did your son make this? He asked. I didn't answer. I just looked at the picture. He waited. I made the original with him. I said, for the treehouse. And did you recently put one like this on your neighbour's lawn? I looked him in the eye and said, no, he didn't push it. But then the uniformed cop said, Mr. Burgess claims you vandalised his property with hazardous materials. He's filing a report. Anything you want to say to that? I stayed quiet. I wasn't going to lie, but I wasn't going to confess either. They left without arresting me. No warrant, no charges, just a warning that if anything else happened, I'd be looked at more closely that night. I found my dad sitting on the back porch. He didn't say anything, just lit a cigarette, something he hadn't done in years. I know it was you, he said after a long silence. I didn't answer. He exhaled slow. You think you're helping him, but you're not. That kind of thing sticks to a kid, the anger, the silence, it doesn't go away. I nodded, even though I didn't agree. Then he said something that really got to me. You're becoming the kind of man you used to hate that sat with me for days, but just as I started to think, maybe I should have left it alone. Maybe I went too far, that's when it happened again. Not to me, to someone else, 2 houses down. The Jeffersons had a swing set in their backyard for their grandkids. Nothing big, just a wooden A-frame with 2 swings and a little slide. One morning, they woke up and it was gone. Same thing, cut clean through, left in pieces. No one heard anything. Mr. Jefferson's wife cried in their driveway. He was yelling into his phone, same as I had been. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about our treehouse. Burgess was doing this to anyone he didn't like. The second I saw the swing set wreckage, something in me snapped. This wasn't a one-time thing. It wasn't a grumpy old man pissed about noise or property lines. This was control. Burgess wanted everyone on this street to live under his rules. No noise, no kids, laughter, no reminders that life existed outside his window. I walked straight to the Jeffersons' driveway. Mr. Jefferson was trying to lift one of the broken beams, but he's in his 70s. I helped him carry it back near the shed. His hands were shaking. He said, "We didn't ask permission," he muttered, said. "We cluttered the view, it was for our grandkids." They're 5 and 7 that night. I called a meeting. 7 neighbours came, 2 families with small kids, 1 young couple, the Jeffersons, a single mum from across the street. Everyone had a story, barking dogs, warning letters, code enforcement visits, anonymous complaints to the HOA, everything led back to Burgess. He filed noise complaints, complained about paint colours, even got someone fined for parking their car too close to the curb. And the worst part, no one had ever stood up to him. He knew how to keep it just legal enough to avoid real trouble. And people here, they didn't like conflict. They just wanted to live in peace. But we weren't living in peace. We were living afraid. So we made a plan. Nothing illegal, no bailism, no threats. But we were going to make him uncomfortable. We were going to give him a taste of what it felt like to live surrounded by people who didn't give a damn what he liked. Every kid on the street got sidewalk chalk and was told to cover their driveway. People started playing music a little louder in the evenings. Someone brought a drum set out into their garage. The Jeffersons hung string lights on their fence and had their grandkids over every day after school. And I did the one thing I knew would push him over the edge. I rebuilt the treehouse. Not the same one, bigger, brighter. And this time I put a motion-activated spotlight on it. When you looked out from the Burgess house at night, it lit up like a beacon. I knew he'd try something, and he did. 1 week later, I caught him in my yard with bolt cutters. It was 2:17 a.m. I remember because I looked at the clock right after I heard the metallic clink outside, like someone bumping into a fence post or dropping a tool. At first, I thought it was a raccoon. But when I looked out the back window, I saw him Burgess standing in my yard, wearing all black, bolt cutters in hand, aimed at the base of the rope ladder. The spotlight hadn't gone off because he'd come around from the back, through the side lot, avoided the sensor. I didn't think I just moved, grabbed the baseball bat from behind the door, didn't put on shoes, just stormed out the back. Barefoot, heart racing. I didn't yell at first, I didn't need to. He saw me froze like a kid caught stealing, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked afraid. "What the hell are you doing?" I said, my voice low, shaky. He tried to talk, tried to spin. Something, it's a hazard. I was going to, you, step one more foot, and I call the police. He took a step back, then another. I have a right to. No, you don't, not anymore. You come near my family, again, you'll wish I had called the cops. Instead, he stood there a second longer, then dropped the bolt cutters and walked off. I called the police. Anyway, they showed up 20 minutes later, took a statement. Found the cutters in my yard. I had the footage from the camera I'd mounted behind the shed, one he didn't see. That should have been the end. But a week later, Burgess filed a restraining order on me. Said I threatened him, said I'd been harassing him, encouraging neighbourhood hostility, making his life unbearable. He even showed the court photos of the new treehouse and said the spotlight was targeted harassment, and somehow the judge granted a temporary order, said we had to cool down, that I couldn't go within 100 feet of his property. I had to tell my son that he couldn't play in his own backyard anymore. That's when my father sat me down and said, "If you want to beat a man like that, you don't fight with your fists, you bleed him slow, the way he's bled this neighbourhood for years." And so that's what I started doing quietly, carefully. And it worked. It started with the permits. I filed a public records request with the city. Took less than a week to get copies of every improvement structure and fence Burgess had put on his property. Over the last 10 years, there were gaps expired, permits, a patio extension that didn't meet setback requirements, a retaining wall that had no inspection sign. It was enough to raise eyebrows. Especially with the right push, I sent anonymous tips to the zoning office. Then I went further. I found a Facebook group for our county, mostly small contractors and realtors. I asked a few innocent questions about legal fence heights, home additions, and trees near property lines. Some local code enforcers were in the group. I made sure they saw the photos within a month. Burgess had 2 city inspectors at his door. I watched from my porch as they walked his property, taking pictures and notes while he followed, red-faced and shouting. He got cited, then fined, then served a formal notice to remove the patio extension or apply for a variance hearing. I didn't stop there. Someone anonymously submitted a complaint about his fence being on public easement, another tip about drainage problems from his downspouts, each one chipped away at him. Slowly, legally, in writing. And while all that was going on, the neighborhood turned cold. People stopped waving at him. Kids avoided his yard. Someone egged his driveway one night. I didn't know who I didn't ask. And the best part, I never laid a finger on him. Every move I made was through channels, paper trails, quiet whispers he started to unravel one morning. I saw him standing in his front yard, just staring at the Jeffersons' house. Nothing happening, just watching, like he was waiting for someone to make a mistake. Then, one night, something shifted. His wife left. I saw her drive off in a packed SUV. She didn't come back. Neighbours said they'd been arguing non-stop, that she couldn't sleep with the constant stress, the inspectors, the stink that still lingered under parts of the house. No matter how much he scrubbed, that he was obsessed with us. The next day, his for sale sign went up. It should have felt like a win, but it didn't. The day the sign went up. Caleb was sitting on the treehouse deck with a book in his lap. He didn't say anything, just looked over at the Burgess house, then down at the yard where all the broken boards had once been. I joined him up there, sat next to him. He didn't look up from the page. "Is he leaving because of us?" he asked. I didn't know how to answer. Technically, yes, but not because of Caleb. Not directly, and definitely not for the reasons that would make any sense to a kid. He made a lot of bad choices. I finally said people stopped putting up with it. Caleb nodded quiet. A week later, moving. Trucks showed up. 2 guys held boxes while Burgess sparked instructions. No Mary, no friends, no one helping, just him pacing in that buttoned-up shirt he always wore, still trying to look like he was in control. He didn't look at me once, not when he left the porch, not when he walked down the driveway. But I watched, not with pride, not with joy, just exhaustion that night after the trucks were gone. My dad and I sat out on the back steps. He handed me a beer and said, "You win." I didn't answer because I wasn't sure anymore what winning meant. I looked at the treehouse lit up in the dark and thought about how it started a quiet project between a grandfather and a boy. Something innocent, something good. And now there was this hole around it, this ache, all because one man couldn't stand the sound of kids laughing sometimes. I wonder if Caleb will remember the treehouse, or if he'll remember the man who tore it down, and the father who quietly made sure he never did it again. Either way, I haven't told him everything, and maybe I never will. But when I see him sitting up there, now, legs swinging off the edge, looking out over the neighborhood like it finally belongs to him again, I just think it should have never taken this much to feel safe in your own backyard card.